Welcome, everybody, to the 4-Day Workweek Entrepreneur Podcast. My name is Wade Galt, and this is Season 2. And in Season 2, we're going a lot more into depth of me connecting with other people, in addition to myself, who can really help you create that 4-Day Workweek lifestyle and create the type of situation where you want, where you're enjoying the ride, making the money, having fun outside of work while you're doing this. And I'm going to read here. So if I look down, this is me reading. Tom and Ariana are co-founders of Lifestyle Builders, a coaching and training company that helps entrepreneurs build their businesses to create more impact with their customers and more freedom in their lives. When they graduated college, Tom set a goal to retire by 35, and the last several years they've spent figuring out how to do that. And now they're helping others to create time and financial freedom in their lives. I've met Tom over the years through different contacts and different mastermind groups and stuff, and got to run into him recently at PodFest. He's an awesome dude. I've not yet had the pleasure to spend as much time talking with Ariana, but at least from listening to their podcast and talk with them, they're the real deal. He's the real deal. And for you, the audience, I try to really plug in the areas where I'm not as strong at. They really seem to have this, or at least between the two of them, because they have they're both styles, seem to be able to plug in some of the areas of some of the nitty gritty things. And sometimes when you hear people talk to you about, say, well, it only took me this long to do this or this long to do that, they don't know what was missing. So if you were to look at my history, you'd say, well, Wade, I didn't know you came from a background where you had a dad who was an entrepreneur, and that already put you ahead. I didn't have that, Wade. A lot of what they're doing is even coming straight from scratch with people who haven't maybe had as much support. And so I think they're going to bring so much to this. I'm so excited to have them. And today we're going to be talking about primarily how to align with your spouse and build a business that creates freedom in your life. So welcome, Ariana. Welcome, Tom. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks for the great intro.
Yeah, and so I can read, so that's good. But and then actually from seeing your stuff, you all are up to it. So really doing what it says. And one of the things that's been very cool in listening to your podcast is I really feel like I've found gaps in just areas I haven't covered yet, which as somebody who doesn't like to work a lot, I was like, oh, awesome. Well, then I'll just tell my people, listen to that episode. So I'm going to be doing that more often. I say, listen to that, because when you first start out as an entrepreneur, you feel like you need to create everything. And if you don't create everything, gosh, you're going to lose all this money and it's all going to go away. And then you realize you're like, wow, no, a partner who can cover that or address something, and you don't have to create it all. And you can just tell somebody, go to this resource. So tell me a little bit about, one of the first things I asked you is what motivates you? What are you passionate about? And of course, at all times, change topics, do as you like. What is it that really got you all started, and what are you all most passionate about?
Absolutely. So I'll get started. And as you'll hear, usually the way it goes is I say something and then Ariana's got a completely different perspective on it.
Or I fill in the gaps about all the things he missed.
Or she's right.
Absolutely, she is. She's always right. So what it came down to was we actually met the very first day of college. And as we were graduating, I had a degree in computer science. She had a degree in zoology. And when we shifted from like college mode into like looking ahead, life mode, one, neither of us had jobs coming out of college. But as I started looking ahead, I was like, you know what? This path that we're laid out on isn't really what I want for myself or for us as we go forward. And so I just on a whim basically said, I want to retire by 35. I had no idea how I was going to make it happen, but I figured it's long enough to let me figure it out, but not too long that I'm going to miss out on life and everything there is to enjoy while doing that. So I set that goal. And then really the last handful of years have been us navigating and figuring out, one, what does that mean to us? And then two, how do we make it happen together?
Awesome.
Yeah, he didn't miss too much in there. He gave you the short version.
I like that. She's like the Russian judge every time to give you your rating on how you did. Okay, that's a 9.2.
Yeah, she really is. Every time I say something, I got to look and be like, did I get it?
You did a good job.
I like the way you said that, because I sometimes tell people it took me 22 years to create the 4-Day Workweek. And that's just, it doesn't have to be 4-Day Workweek. That's just what I call it, so people even understand what I'm talking about. If I said 3-Day Weekend, people always think about, extreme sports and Mountain Dew ads and all that stuff. And if I say 4-Day Workweek, they get it. And I didn't have a specific, as clear of a goal the way you had it. And actually that's part of the reason it took me as long to get there, because I kind of knew I wanted to have fun. I very clearly knew I wanted to do what I want. So my dad is from the islands. He's from Trinidad and Tobago. And he always says, Wade, you only want to do what you want to do. Like, oh, yeah. See, that's the idea. Of course. But what he was trying to say is you're not focused on what that looks like. And it's just kind of vaguely, just literally whatever you want to do. And it was only about maybe, and to be clear, I became an entrepreneur 7 years after working in the workforce. So in that sense, again, I knew what I didn't want, but it was only when I started getting clear what I wanted. It was in a matter of about 12 months after that it happened. Now, again, it wasn't 12 months total because I'd been doing the journey, but it was something that was so clear. And gosh, when I tell people, when you set a goal, it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, all of a sudden confidence level just becomes, well, gosh, it's almost actually inevitable. I mean, if I start learning to play drums today and put in 15 to 30 minutes a day, all of a sudden it's not this mystical thing about learning the drums or the guitar. And so many people don't do it that way. And so my message, as I've shared with you all, there's really three groups of people that most resonate with what I'm doing. People that are not yet doing it. And I'll just use the word apprentices. And apprentices, they're almost just by default pushing it back because it seems like too big of a goal. It's like, no, let's start now. And even if it's going to take you 22 years, look, it took me 22 years. It's still worth it to be able to work a 4-day work week and do what you want with your time. But if you're wise about it, if you're willing to take coaching and learn from people who've done that, you'll get there a lot earlier.
Yeah, well, and that's such a great point because one of the things, so when I set that goal, there was then a lot in between to figure out, well, okay, great, we set the goal, but how do you make it happen? And especially when there's two of us and we had very different perspectives on things. Like I remember our first time coming together to try to talk about goals, like it didn't go over well. No. And so through a lot of just, communication and trial and error, what we found was that the important thing is to first set the vision, get aligned on what you want your life to look like. And then what we do now is we work backwards and we build a roadmap. And what that allows you to do, I always compare it to like GPS. When you're going to go somewhere, you start with entering a destination. Here's where I want to go. Then you say, here's my starting point. And what your GPS does is it builds you a route, or a plan or a roadmap. And what makes a GPS so much superior to a map or anything else is that it's not just setting that plan once and you're going to follow it. It's setting that plan, but constantly checking in. And that's what we all need to be doing. We need to be setting a vision for what we want things to look like. We need to set a roadmap and then take that first step and then constantly be checking in to say, am I on the right path? Am I going in the right direction? And when I get off, because of course we will, then let's realize that I'm off and make some adjustments to get back on track. And we've had to make so many adjustments over the years, but it all came through starting to put a process like this in place so we could tell when we weren't on the right path or when we weren't making the progress we wanted and then could shift that way.
That's great. And I think that's so important for people to realize that you don't have to get it right. There's so much pressure. That's one of the reasons I always would just crumble when I do a business plan. I'd spend hours and I have to get this right instead of realizing I just need to get from point A to point B. And maybe I'm going to get to Z someday. I might never get to Z, but I'm at least going to get to L or M, or by, a certain time I'm going to get somewhere, and all that pressure off of it. And I think, when you look back at how things were done, at least when I was raised, that everybody who was a business expert positioned themselves as the finished product. And you just look at this finished product, and the idea was to inspire awe in you that, like, okay, buy my stuff because I'm so awesome. And I just find I love is that there's so many more people that are sharing their steps in the process, not just sharing the finished product. And then also, when you look at different coaching programs or coaches, there are some that have progressed so far that they admittedly do forget what it was like at the beginning. I know is it when I train on a subject that I've taught for 20 years, sometimes I forget and I have to kind of bring it back. And I think it's great having people that have gone through different steps. And certainly there are not a lot of people that are working at this from a couple standpoint or a family standpoint. Usually it's been the one person or the solo or the hero. And it's like, well, she's in the background helping. And it's like, okay, we can do better than that. And usually it's way more than that. I've watched my mother help my dad grow his business. And at the very least, she was like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And it might sound like she did nothing, but she saved him $50,000 there, $100,000 there, huge headaches there, hours there, and being able to share that with people. So how do you connect with people that are couples, and how do you help them? Because you all seem to have a very good rapport, but I think it goes back perhaps to part of what you're talking about. You all have a common vision. So if we all say we're going to a certain area, and it's not so much about who's right, but we're looking to get here. And if we're open to how we get there, that's a little easier. How have you guys been able to manage that, the balance, or what could potentially become a power struggle with two talented, intelligent people?
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to jump in and take this one. The biggest issue that we had early on was that Tom had already had that big epiphany, that realization that this pathway was a different opportunity to get to the end goal that we both had in mind. But what it took us years to figure out was that he was trying to drag me along with him. And I hadn't yet had the same realization. I was coming at this from a supportive spouse. Hey, you're trying to do this thing. I get why you're trying to do it, sort of. And I'm supportive of that, but I'm not really sure yet that this is the path for me and that this is the path that we ultimately want to be on. And I hadn't had that realization for a long time. So, I mean, if you go back to some of our early stuff, I call myself the accidental entrepreneur. I call myself the reality checker. I call myself what was it before? There's something else in there too. Like I just have these evolution of these names because I didn't consider myself a true entrepreneur until probably last year at some point. And
Oh, wow.
what I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget is their spouse they are not having the same journey. So you can't jump in and expect them to do a cannonball in next to you because there's a lot of fears that come up. There's a lot of uncertainty. And in our case, and in many others that we've talked to, there's a big personality difference. So we attack things differently. We solve problems differently. We process emotions and thoughts differently. So you've got to kind of come to this together like we talked about with that vision. And you've got to open up conversation and you have to drop your expectations of what you have for your spouse because most likely they aren't going to be able to meet those expectations yet. So you've got to give them the time and space.
Well, and to that point, here's what usually happens, especially when you've got couples involved. You're both kind of going along on your path and things are good. And then something happens to one of you, some event, like maybe it's a death in the family. Maybe it's just a really bad day at work and you're like, I'm sick of this. Whatever it is, something happens to one of you and it puts you on this path where you then have this epiphany or this realization and you're ready to go all in. And usually for the entrepreneur, something like that happens and we come back and we're ready to go. What we completely forget is that our spouse hasn't traveled along that same path and hasn't had that epiphany. So we try to like force it on them where I would come back and be like, hey, we're going to start a business. She's like, what are you talking about? Why are we doing this? And it was that, why are we doing this? That was the biggest thing, because once we align on why we're doing something and really where we want to go, then we can talk about how to do it. But for years, when things weren't working with us, it was because I kept telling Ariana I want to start a business, and she kept like not understanding why and resisting. And it wasn't until we aligned on ultimately what we wanted to achieve, and then work backwards to say, well, how do we get there, and what makes sense, that we finally made it work.
And that's so huge, because I think of the conversations I've watched with my wife and I on that. And in my father's case, it might have been simpler because he worked sort of a franchise model. So the franchise had been established. So when he said, I want to do this, he's an insurance agency owner, the model was there. So you could point to it and say, I want to do that. Okay, yay or nay. And in my case, was this joke, my wife met me, and a while after meeting her, I moved in Hollywood Beach, was overlooking the ocean. I've got this place, got my computer, and I have a software business. I have my Excel spreadsheets. And one day she's like, tell me, what do you do? She just pointed to a spreadsheet with a graph on it. I do that. and off of that, she's like, sure, why not? Let's go. And say, talk about a leap of faith. And as she says, maybe that's what a 24-year-old does. That might not be what somebody who's older and wiser does. And as we've talked over the years, exactly what you're talking about, of getting excited about something and actually not realizing that and getting very hurt. Like, why don't you believe in me? Don't you understand? I thought we were on the same team. And I mean, if you all haven't, my gosh, there's at least a book or an audio or something in there, because especially even just for the entrepreneur whose spouse never becomes an entrepreneur, because wow, because then it's, well, wait, how can we can afford money for this doohickey you think is going to make us money, but we can't afford money for this thing over here that's emotional and important to me or family related. Are you saying money's more important than family? No, I'm saying I think this doohickey is going to save me, and the entrepreneurial gods are going to shine down upon me, and all of a sudden money's going to flow. And then all of a sudden we can, and of course it doesn't always happen that way, which is a whole other story. But then you're like Jack with the beans. And you're like, okay, yeah, honey, I didn't buy the thing you wanted, the roses or the chocolate or the massage. I got this, these cost per click ads at a discount. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a really good point there, because it's first getting aligned on where you want to go. And then it's figuring out, okay, well, what is the path we're going to take to get there? And what role do we each play? And so like one of the activities that, has really been beneficial to us, and we have everyone go through, is each person kind of fills out what goals they want to achieve in order to get to that vision, that ideal life, and then lays it out on a time frame. And then you bring it together and you start putting it up. So we literally put it on the wall. We give each person Post-it notes. And like one thing that Ariana always brings up is like, she wanted to buy a house. And when she put it up, it was like 2 years out on our roadmap. And I wanted to buy a house, and I had it out on like 5 years. And so instantly what we found when we did this activity was we both wanted the same thing, but the time frame was different. And by identifying that difference, we were able to talk about it and be like, well, why do you want it in 2 years? Well, why do you want it in 5 years? Okay, if we do it in 2 years, what else has to shift, because we can't make all of this work? And so what we were then able to do is to figure out, here's the gap we have. We then aligned on what made sense, and we were able to then move forward together. Where what happens with a lot of people is they're like, oh yeah, we both want to buy a new house. Everything's good. They don't realize there's still a difference in expectation. And unless you're checking in and understand what those are, you're going to be upsetting each other and not even realize it.
Absolutely. And then there's that sense that I know at least some people get sold on that, well, if you're married and if you love each other, you'll just understand each other. You won't have to roadmap.
Yeah, I mean,
my wife's from a Latin culture. So, it's so unromantic that you should have to plan that. I mean, if you love each other, if you loved each other, it would just, and that's not just a Latin culture. It's the drama, and it's like, no, and we've learned that in other things since, like how we raise our children. We both love our children very much, have different approaches as to how we do that. And both also, the other part that for me was just mind blowing as a somewhat egotistical at times guy of, holy cow, there's another way other than mine that might also have some value and work. And in fact, in some situations is better. So.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, like everything that's worth going after takes work. And like your marriage takes work, building a business takes work, being a great parent takes work, being great at a hobby you have takes work. And so one of the big realizations we had was that we were looking at what was important to us and where we were investing our time, our money, our resources. And oftentimes that didn't line up. So like last year, one of the best things we did was we put a theme, and we said, we've been building businesses, we've been having kids. We want to put us first. We want to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, our relationship. And so one of the best things we did was started to go see a marriage counselor. And instantly when you say that, everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Like, are you guys okay? And the first session we had, our therapist actually said, she's like, you know what, you guys are doing this right. You have a great relationship. Some things could be better, but you're not letting it go on for years and years until it gets to a really bad point, and then it's so much further to come back from. And that was spot on, because once we were intentional about a lot of this stuff and we got the support we needed, like everything else became a lot easier. Now, it was difficult along the way, because part of growing is looking at what's not working or where there's disconnects and learning from it. But I mean, that's one of the things I think a lot of people think, oh, people say the business is easy, it'll just happen if I invest in this course. Or, oh, we're in love, so, we'll just have this great relationship. It's like, no, anything that's important takes work. And a lot of people just don't realize that. They just look at, like you said, the after version, and are like, oh yeah, like, look at that person did it, so it was easy.
Yeah. And then to that, I think you almost have this extreme that either you have to be a billionaire or you have to work for somebody. Like I saw a post a while back, and I forget who was saying, they were saying that I don't know her name, I think it was Randy Zuckerberg, or somebody had said, well, to be a billionaire, there's these 5 things, it's family, this, that, and you have to choose. You can only have 3 of them. And I just, and I'm sure part of it was to get people to comment, because it's a controversial statement in a way. I said, look, I'm not a billionaire. So maybe to be a billionaire, I can't comment on whether or not that's true. But I know to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to have all those things, because, you don't have to choose. You can do all those things. And, when you look at, let's say, sports, and you say, I can look at my son who's 12 years old. If you say you want to be in the NBA and be an all-star in the NBA, okay, that's a low percentage chance, even if you've got all the gifts, all the talents, and work hard. But if you say, I want to play high school basketball, or I want to play college basketball, and I'm willing to put in the hours and the time, it's almost inevitable.
Mm.
And one of the things that I try to do, and it sounds like you all are doing the same, is help the people I work with realize we can take so many things and take them from almost impossible and turn them to inevitable. So, when you look at a marriage, one of the things, I don't know if this just dawned on me or somebody told me, but I've had many positive influences in my life about marriage and relationships. So I think it just sort of came to me was, the way you have a marriage is every day you wake up and you choose to have marriage. And that means all the other stuff that comes up, you put second, and the marriage is here, or the idea of supporting each other, however, whatever that looks, not just staying together at all costs, but okay, we're going to have a healthy, happy, as best as possible relationship. We're going to have fights, arguments, disagreements, this, that, and the other. But if I keep that up here, and even when I'm fighting and ticked off, at the back of my head, there's like, okay, you're going to be making up at some time soon. Maybe ease off on some of the stupid stuff you're saying, or whatever it might be, because this is that important to you. Or raising kids. And so, I don't know if one of the things that used to just crack me up was my sister is a very hardworking parent. And when her kids were so well behaved at 5 and 6, hear all the other moms say, "Oh, Natalie's so lucky." Like you say, yeah, of course you want to say that because you're out partying and drinking and your kids have been delegated to somebody. And sorry if that hurts anybody's feelings, but they didn't put the time there. And it was more painful to say, well, actually we chose our personal life. And certainly there's a balance there because we've done it at times in different ways. But again, getting to that point of inevitability, from what you're telling me, if you're willing to map out your process and your goals and where you're going and your vision, all of a sudden it goes more into that inevitable category rather than the impossible or unattainable.
Yeah. Well, so the tagline of our coaching business is your life, your business, your way. And the reason we really came up with that and how that came about was we just kept looking at people that were like making all those statements, right? Like, oh, to be a billionaire, you got to do these 5 things. And what we realized from not only our own experience, but also talking to a lot of entrepreneurs was that everyone's definition of success is different. And a lot of people think that you've got to build like a $10 million business to be successful. And what we've often found when people do that visioning and then lay out what they want their life to look like, you can then figure out how much money is required to make that happen and then build a business that does that. And for a lot of people, if you build like a $500,000 a year business and you do it right, that's going to cover everything you want. So like, there's not a need to become a billionaire. What you got to ask is, well, why do you want that thing? What is going to be different in your life when that thing happens compared to something else? And for most people, you need a lot less than you think to truly be happy. But we've got this mindset that like, oh, when I'm a millionaire, then I can do these things. Where the way you want to think about it is, what are the things I want to do? And then what has to be true, or what do we have to start structuring in our life to make that a reality now or much sooner in the future?
Well, and I think there's an assumption that money equals easy. So, if I make $1 billion in my business, my life will be easy. I can do whatever I want. I can buy whatever I want. And a lot of people don't understand that the correlation there is the more money you make in your business, typically the more you have to work in your business, because a lot of people don't set the foundations up and they don't set up the processes and they don't build the team to be able to make that $1 billion business give them more freedom in their lives rather than less. So I think we see all of these people out there that are killing it in the entrepreneurship world, and all of their videos and all of their Instagram photos and all of their Facebook posts is all about their success and how they did these couple things and they made all this money and it's just amazing and their life's amazing. You don't see their progress to that point, and they're also not showing you what their life looks like. There's a lot of people that are willing to sacrifice their life, their freedom, their time with family, their time with friends to be up there at that level of success that they think everyone else sees as successful. Like I want to be in Forbes magazine, all this stuff. When in reality, there's a lot of people that are extremely successful, that are making a lot of money, that have freedom in their lives to go on big vacations or buy big houses. They're not making that much money compared to the billionaires out there. So it's really, it's changing your perspective even sometimes of what that means and what it means to you. Because for me, I would much rather have a fulfilling life and freedom and time with our kids and our friends and to be able to do the things that we enjoy than I would like to drive a Lamborghini or, some other super expensive car and live in a mansion.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because one of the perspectives I've been blessed to have is my parents are from Trinidad and Tobago, which third world country, economy is a mess. My wife's from Peru. We've lived down there about 4 years on and off over the last 10 to 12 years. And one of the things that people, if you happen to live in America, or if you're anywhere in a first world country and if you do look up somewhere what your income level is in the worldwide perspective, most of us and a lot of our audience are already in the top 10, 15, 20 at most percent of wealthiest people on the planet. And I just say to people, look, if you're already in the top 20% and you're not happy yet, the variable is not the money.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I'd rather have more money. I'm a fan of having the money. But to your point, just over the years, I've noticed to get to $60,000 to $70,000 a year as an entrepreneur over a 3 to 5 year period is not very difficult. If you're focused, because you can do that as a freelance, you can do that on an hourly basis and get hours and just do a job well. And people are so caught up in it has to be 300,000. You're in the top 1% of income earners in the US. Mm-hmm. And then from a planet standpoint, you don't need that much. But like you said, Tom, to get clear about what does that mean to you? Because when you're short a little of what you'd like to have and you're carrying a little credit card debt, it seems like so much more. But when you make that less, okay, what else actually would I get? Okay, this thing, that thing. And there's only usually about 2 or 3 more things. And you're like, okay, then I'd save some money for retirement. Okay, and all of a sudden you realize it's not that big. I mean, there's the discretionary number. It might be, I'd love another 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 a month. But even still, in the context of building a business, that might not be that big of a deal. And to your point, it doesn't have to be $10 million. And that's the part that kills a lot of people. Say, it has to be 10 million. Therefore, it's going to be too far. Again, it's the difference between aiming for the NBA versus just saying, I just want to play basketball and be happy and enjoy the process. And maybe I just play at the YMCA each week, but I want to play until I'm 55 or to whenever. Great. Totally different goal and perhaps different reasons.
Well, and to your point, money is just an amplifier of what you already are and what you already have. So if you're not happy now, like this is why lottery winners often go broke, right? Because they don't have the foundations and they don't have that fulfillment on their own, that when they suddenly get a whole bunch of money, it just amplifies all the bad habits and everything that they're not happy with. Whereas on the flip side, if you're happy and content with what's going on, usually money actually comes easier because you're now in a place where you can make money in a good way, where you feel good and confident about it, and you can actually do more. And that's why people come to us and they always want to they have this thing, I put a post up on Facebook the other day where I either have to quit my job and go all in, or I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. And we call BS on that all the time because you want to have safety, especially if you're in a relationship, if you have a family. You want to have safety and know that your bills are covered and things are going to be okay. And you can build your business in the right way on the side until you start validating and start making money and then see a path forward to where you can leave. But there's this myth out there that entrepreneurs are big risk takers and, you need to burn the boats or jump off the cliff and build your airplane on the way down. Well, guess what? If you don't build it fast enough on the way down, you're like the Wile E. Coyote. You're crashing into the ground. That's not a good way to do it. What's a much better way is take care of yourself and make sure you're happy and set. Figure out what that needs to be, and then figure out a way to increase the amount of money that you're making, which will help make that even better.
Yeah, I think one of the toughest things about entrepreneurism is when you have people that are coaching it, in order to sell it, a lot of the times they'll sell this dramatic vision. And it's very often this very machismo, dramatic, Herculean, Odyssey or Iliad type thing where, there's scaling, there's monsters and there's dragons and no, dude, you need to make more dollars than you spend. That's it. And initially somebody pays you that. And then over time you find out a way to, and by the way, you'll still have bosses. You just have more of them. As I tell people, you don't have a boss. I say, yeah, I just have 300 software clients. I have 300 bosses. I just don't have one boss and I can fire any one client. So that's nice. But of course I still have bosses. I have people that pay my salary or pay my income or however you want to word that. And but being clear that if you're just, it could just be this, like you said, and it's almost not even worth commenting. It's the whole millionaire next door concept, as you all mentioned, one of the books you said you all like, of it's actually meant to be boring. Coming from the insurance industry, which is one of the oldest residual income models there is, I should just remind people, my clients, say, look, if this is getting exciting after 3 to 5 years, you're doing it wrong. It's not supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to actually just do this in a recession. Oop, okay. That, and that's a solid business. And it takes connections. As somebody who has online courses, as I know, it sounds like you all do too. Would I love to have 3 million people come in tomorrow and drop 1,000 a course on my stuff? Sure. Is that probably going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. And it's going to come from relationships and meeting people. And yes, going to conferences and connecting with people and doing all these things, but that's also part of the process. And, there's something I once heard about, money amplifying, but it was based on drugs. The comedian said, why do you do cocaine? The guy says, because it intensifies your personality. He says, what if you're a jackass? That's not so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and to your point about the amount of money, what we've found is that, there's different steps on that journey. And usually the first step for most people is what we call your freedom number. And that's ultimately what is the amount of money that you need to be bringing in to, let's say, replace your job. So at that point, you're able to pay all your bills, all your expenses, and everything's good. So when we start working with most people, the first thing we have them do, or one of the early things, is figure out what is that number. Because first point today is however your money's coming in, you want to make sure you're making more money than you're spending. Because if that's upside down in your personal life, that's the first thing we got to correct. We got to reduce some expenses. We got to work on making some extra income until that's shifted. Then when you go to build a business, you want to build it in the same way, right? Like you said, bring more money in that's going out. And what you want to be doing is building that intentionally until that business income can then replace your income. Because at that point, you have options. And once you've hit that number, now we can then start building beyond that and what we call your dream number. This is now everything on your vision board, everything that you want to do. But once you have that freedom number and you're able to then cover everything, a lot of things open up and things become a little bit easier because now you've gotten things taken care of and you show up differently. You show up confident because now you've been able to make this work. You know that your family and your life is taken care of, and you can shift away from us and taking care of us and shift now into how do I help more people, right? How do I make a bigger impact in the causes or the things that really matter to me? And that's a big shift that we found entrepreneurs go through. And it's sometimes challenging because usually most of us are starting this out to like take care of our families, right? Mm-hmm. Have more time, have more freedom. And then when we achieve that, we almost go through this like weird thing where it's like, okay, well,
now what?
That was what I was trying to do. And now that I've got that, what's next?
Well, and I think too, one of the biggest issues that we've seen with talking to entrepreneurs about what's your goal? My goal is to leave my job, to have more freedom, have more time with my family. Awesome. Us too. But they have this idea in their heads that they only need to make as much in their business as they need to bring home.
Yeah.
And that is a huge, huge cause for conflict later on when they realize that that's not going to work because you actually have things that you have to pay for in your business that you can't take home all your income that you're making in your business as your own personal income. And, people, I'm a freelancer. It goes on my bank account. And we're like, no. You have to pay taxes on that. And the government is going to come back and find you. And if you haven't set that aside, come tax time, you're going to be in a very, very tough position. Because if your business can't all of a sudden take on 50 new clients to cover that tax bill, now you're in a bad spot. And if you're somebody who's responsible for other people and you've got kids, like that is not somewhere you want to put yourself. So we always, always, always talk about that freedom number. And then we make that little red flag warning sign reminder, your freedom number, you are going to actually have to make more than that in your business to actually bring home the amount that is your freedom number in your personal life.
Yeah. And, something you said, a couple of things you said I really like is one, that you intentionally build a business because sometimes people will sell stuff or make something hits. They don't know why it happened or how to replicate it. And that's not such a good thing. And then two, probably one of the best bits of advice I got. I started as an entrepreneur 20 years ago and there wasn't, the internet was there, but there wasn't YouTube videos and that sort of stuff. And I read this one book and one of the main pieces of advice that stuck out for me was if you're irresponsible as an employee and don't pay your bills outside of work and don't keep up with stuff, you're going to do the same thing when you have a business. And if you do pay your bills, chances are you're going to find a way to do that. And again, this concept of find that in between baby step. It doesn't have to be this dramatic jump. In fact, that's one of the worst things you can do. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the couple that says, our relationship's miserable. Let's have kids. That'll make it better. Oh, okay, no.
Great analogy.
No, that's not how you do that. And in a similar way to say, okay, my job, so many people are moving away from something. And even the 4-day work week, the basic concept is, this work less, make more. And you say, okay, why do you want to work less? Because I don't like my work. Okay. And I've come to find that, some people, you meet them there and some will say, wait, I love what I do. I want to work forever, as many hours as I can. And I remind them, or I shouldn't say remind them because that assumes I'm right. But I say, well, what about the other things going on the planet other than what's happening inside your laptop or whatever it might be? But also, I think a lot of us do start an issue with moving away from something. And then, as you said, once you then are hitting at least your freedom number, and you see that you hit that a few months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, it hits a tax return, 2 tax returns, where you're like, okay, I kind of have this. Now you can start, hopefully make that shift where it's not just about what can I do for me. And I don't mean that in a way it has to be altruistic that makes it better, but because it's a more expansive vision. Because even if you say, well, now I want a Lamborghini, not a Toyota Camry, that's still in the overall scheme of things, it's a pretty small vision compared to what if you're just out to help the world, and how does that change how you do things? You still have to pay your bills. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who can be a bit of a dreamer at sometimes, I have to remind myself, okay, no way, you can't drop $1,000 or $5,000 on ads to say how good your stuff is if you can't also pay your bills. You have to create that additional. And maybe that is part of your dream number where you have the money to put, to buy your way on to traffic or this or that. And there's other strategies that get done. And maybe when you see people, if you're an entrepreneur and you see other people, you say, their stuff's not as good as my stuff, but they're in front of more people. Maybe they are better at closing. Maybe they're better. I look at people, I'm not the greatest marketer. I'm a really good salesperson. And I'm a really good coach. I'm not a really good, hey, buy my stuff now person, but that's also okay. I've been doing this 20 years and I've learned the long game and how it works. But for a lot of people in the short run, it can seem like they have to make this jump that's so impossible, which then leads to the overpriced, overpromised $10,000 or $25,000 mastermind, or even $3,000 coaching program that they can't afford, rather than get an ebook. And if you like the person's ebook, implement 5 to 7 things from that are worth something and make up at least 10 times the cost of the ebook. And then, that sort of a process, as opposed to having it be so magical. What have you found is a good way to help people accept that or get okay with that reality that it's not this magical thing?
We figured out we can't tell people that because they don't want to hear that. Everyone is unfortunately looking for the easy button. And because online marketing and internet entrepreneurship is such a low barrier to entry, I mean, you can do it for free.
Yep.
Everyone thinks like, oh my gosh, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to do exactly what that person did. And I'm going to make all this money and my life's going to be amazing. And when you tell people like, no, you can't do it that way. You have to do it this way. And you try to pop that little bubble that they have of like that rose colored vision of, oh, this is going to be so great. They don't want to listen to you. They don't want to hear that it's not going to be easy. They don't want to hear that the way that they want to do it isn't the right way, or maybe isn't going to work for them like they think it is. So what we found is you almost have to let people make their own mistakes. You can still talk about these things. You can still talk about the truth and have that message. And there are some people who are going to listen right away. They're gonna be like, oh my gosh, those people, they're telling us the real deal and I don't want to waste my money. So I'm going to go over there and listen to them. And, that's very few and far between. And what we've seen, a lot of people are coming in and they want the easiest path to success. So we just continue to share our message and to talk about those things, but we also go back and, you kind of can nurture people along. So you can talk to them at where they're at and, say, hey, I know you really thought that course you bought was going to work. We understand. We feel you. We've done that. Here's how we've found, after you've bought something and it didn't go the way you planned, you can still implement things from that and you can still get to where you want to go.
Well, and I mean, here's the thing. what you can do with people is lay out two paths. It's like, here's one path. You go, you spend all this money, you try this stuff, and here's what's going to happen. And guess how we know that? One, we went through it. Two, we've talked to so many other people that have done it. So that's one path, and it looks like the fast path, but what it's actually going to do is cost you a lot of time, a lot of energy, and likely a lot of frustration, because you're going to be like, I spent all this money, I did all these things, why didn't it work? Or you take this other path where you truly understand, you start small, it's not nearly as sexy, but you buy the $20 ebook or you listen to the free content and you get some of the stuff figured out. And then the biggest thing is with your investments should match where you're at in your business, right? So a story that we tell often, or I tell and Ariana rags on me about, is I spent $7,500 to get started on our real estate investment company. And there was no need to do that. I mean, there's so much free information out there, or just spending $100 on books would have got me more than I got out of that course. So what we always recommend to people is start where you're at, get the information, start making some sales, and then take that money and reinvest it back in. And guess what? The more money you make, the more you can reinvest back in. But early on, spending $10,000 on something isn't going to secretly make you successful. And more often than not, you're not at a point with your personal development and your growth that you can even take advantage of everything that's in there.
Yeah, I tell people, so I coach basketball for my son's basketball team. And the analogy I use is, your son's 10. I may not be the greatest basketball coach in the world, but I can teach him or her the fundamentals. You don't want to spend $10,000 for an hour private lesson with LeBron James yet, because they can't digest it. And this is the other part that you're saying LeBron James is good. Nope, you missed what I said. There's nothing to do with LeBron James. They're not ready to digest it. There is a group of people that would gladly, a lot of the NBA stars would gladly take a 1 hour lesson from him if he wanted to do that. Not sure he wants to, but he would do that, and it'd probably be much more than 10,000. And that sense of patience around it, and understanding that there is sort of a natural process to it. And, coming from the insurance background, a lot of the companies are named after farms. So there's State Farm, there's Farmers Bureau, there's Farmers Insurance. I just remind people, look, that's natural. You plant a seed, you water it, you nurture it, you sunlight, you wait. That's how most of this, if you want to be in this for the long run, that's how most of this works, is you're planting something, you're growing something, you're building something. And of course, you're learning that other people need to benefit from this, and you're learning these lessons. Or as my wife, as she got more skilled at coaching me, would say, honey, I understand you want to do all these new courses. Let's do this. And she used my own sort of voodoo on me. She's like, let's have you make time investments for you to learn all this stuff you want to learn. And let's have less financial investments of you dropping $5,000 to $10,000 on a course. But the truth is, that's what I didn't want to hear. I wanted to hear that, me too. Hey, if I put in 10,000, magically, now I've got this magical template or this magical email. And all of a sudden now people say, oh, you got the email. Oh, I got to buy now. It says that I must. And then we even get this sense, or at least I have, of anger at the coaches or the mentors and this entitlement. Well, you said I'd do this. And some of them outright do say that. Mm-hmm. And then some of them will just say, they might not 1,000% say it, but they do their best, say, it's going to require work. It's a journey. And find out, you go back and it was there, but you didn't hear it because all you heard was, quick, easy, fix. But again, most of the things, your best relationships or your friends, usually from a while, your family, these are things that didn't happen right away. And yes, obviously you want new relationships and growing and developing, but to think that the person you just met is going to be your best friend for life when you just met him a half hour ago, it's kind of magical thinking any more than the person you just met is going to be your soulmate. Maybe it happens, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, well, like a big part of this too, just building off of what you're saying, we always tell people, like, this takes time and it takes work, and you have to commit to the process, not to the goals. And it's so easy for people to go and think that I can buy a course and I can have quick success. The faster you get something, the faster it can all go away. And like, we actually had an experience. So we have our first book coming out this year called Lifestyle Builders. And we actually have an experience we talk about in the book where we were showing it to someone and getting feedback, and they were like, just not liking it. They're like, this isn't hitting the mark. No one's going to be reading this. And what we came to find out was that they wanted to just dive right into the business. And we don't talk about the business until the third section of the book. The first section is getting clear on what you want out of your life. The second section is really getting your personal finances in order. And then the third section is where we start talking about the business. And usually what we can tell is if somebody wants to jump right to the business and wants to skip the first two parts, they're going to be that person that Ariana said, go and spend all the money, and then maybe makes it back to us later on being like, you know what, you guys are right. I should have listened to you. It would have saved me all this time, all this money. But if that person is willing to go in and go through the process and trust the process that people have gone through before, they're going to be a lot more successful. So much of this is that, how are you approaching this? Are you approaching this as like, I want to make quick money and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make it? Or are you approaching it as I'm committing to doing what needs to be done and growing myself so that I can build a business that lasts and not only helps take care of my family, but also creates a really good impact with the customers that I'm serving with the business?
I love that analogy because it's, or the way you have your chapters lined out. I think of listening to what Gary Vee says about, not everybody should be an entrepreneur. Everybody thinks they should be an entrepreneur. And analogy to a marriage would be to say, I don't want to think about what I want out of life. Number one, I don't want to do my own work to make sure I'm a healthy individual that's dealt with my baggage. I just want to get married. As if that is the end all be all. And again, as if the marriage is the path to happiness, as opposed to, it can be a lot of things depending on how you run with it, how you roll with it, and what you're looking for from it.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. Like, as people are going through this, it's not, I hate my job, therefore I need to be an entrepreneur.
No.
Like, for most people, the answer is figure out what kind of job you want and go and get that one, and we talk to most people, and most people have some sort of a desire to build like a business. And for the most part, it's to help create more options. Because here's the thing, anytime you have one source of something, that's a single point of failure. So your job could be going great and suddenly it gets acquired or something changes and suddenly you lose that job and now you're stuck. So what we always tell people is you always want to set yourself up with multiple options. Like, part of why we built multiple businesses is so that we have multiple income streams. And our first business is in real estate. Now, we actually bought in 2007, 2008 when the whole market went down. So our second business is actually a retail store, wine and liquor, very consistent year over year. And our third business is more of a service consulting online type business. So everything we've done, it hasn't been just building one business, but it's building multiple so that we have options and are really mitigating any of that risk that could come up. And for far too many people, they're not thinking that way. They're like, if it's not this, then it's got to be that. And that's the only way I'm going to look at it.
Well, it's funny you say that because I joke with people. My core business for the last 20 years has been a software business that I never planned to be in. But my clients basically almost screamed to me, Wade, we need this software piece. I created it. And it's been paying 80% of my bills for 20 years because I was willing to listen. And then I have all the other romantic things that I want to build that might not be the exact same thing. And sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't. And meanwhile, there's Old Faithful just going along. And at different times, my wife will say, Wade, what about that software thing you're doing? How about we grow that? And there's some market forces, or at least that I tell myself that why it's not meant to grow. And part of it's I don't have a huge passion for it. But definitely, I think there's a lot of sources that have said the average millionaire has 6, 7, 8. I think the average number is 7 sources of income. And because things shift, things change. And again, to think that it's going to be otherwise is like having one friend and assuming that one friend is going to always be the source of your happiness or that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, and the other challenge with that is people will often reference that quote you had and then think that they need to immediately go and create 7 sources of income. And that's one of the biggest ways to have failure is to not focus on one thing. So like for us, we both had jobs and we started our first business. We got that going, got that built up. Ariana left her job. We started our second business. We got that going, got that up. We started our third business. And I didn't leave my job until after we had that third business going. And so we didn't do them all at once. The whole secret, quote unquote, is figure a business out, get people paying you money for it, figure out what it needs to look like to be able to run without you having to be involved in it day to day, get those systems, get the team set up, free up your time and effort and energy, and then start a second stream. Like that is the secret. It's not doing all at once. It's doing one at a time and then moving on to the next one.
And
that's one of the biggest
11 years time span.
There's so much you can do. That doesn't mean you should do it. take the one approach, and I know you know this, but your first business, of course, was your third source of income, because you are, like you said, you had two of you all. So again, it's not this magic. You just said one day we quit everything because we're bold and we're brave and we're Americans, damn it. And it's like, no, there's a lot of, there's a lot of pioneers that just got shot for doing stupid things. The ones we read about in the history books are the ones that made it. And some just, no, they did something really stupid. They got shot. They're dead. You never hear about them because that's just what happened. I want to shift just a little bit because there's, gosh, I know from talking with you already, there's so deep we could go. What I want to do is go into a couple questions. There's 3 segments I found, and again, it sounds like you all are very familiar with them, of people we run into a lot in the work that I do. And even though I first chose to name this the 4-Day Workweek Entrepreneur Podcast, and part of it's because I've worked with entrepreneurs and I know that group is resonating with this. There's 2 other groups that I find that are really working on this. One is the group that I call apprentices, which again are the people that they're just thinking, wow, this would be so cool, but they don't believe it's possible. And then there's the freelancers that are kind of that in between. So I've got a couple quick questions, and I'm going to do this if it's okay. I'm going to drive a little bit here. I'm going to just alternate and ask you all a question and kind of as a quick answer. So first section, in the sense of work-life balance, what do you all most enjoy doing when you're not working, and how can you tell when you've been working too much? Like what lets you know that?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So when you're not in like the flow state and when you're not enjoying it, usually that's a sign that, you're working too much. And one of the biggest things we've started doing is really aligning our schedules and how we work to when we're in the flow state. And there's days where maybe we're not feeling it and we give ourselves the grace to take time off. And so when we're not working, we're doing stuff usually with family or we're doing our own hobbies.
Awesome. And how do you find, this is the part that especially I try to help people understand, again, whether they're an employee or an entrepreneur or a freelancer is something sort of a way of saying in between. When you're working too much, how can you tell it's impacting the people around you, and how can you quickly address that?
I think for us, the biggest indicator is in our children. They're very reactive to our state of mind and the way that we're showing up. So a lot of times I will be dealing with kids with an attitude and I'm thinking in my head, like, what is going on with them? And it's that thought, like, wait a minute. Okay, we've been working a lot. We've been having a lot of calls. We've been, doing a lot of parent swapping where he's working and I'm watching them, or I'm working and he's watching them. And I've been irritable and tired. So now it's reflecting back because they're irritable and tired. So a lot of times the kids are my biggest and first indicator that one or both of us is not where we need to be from a mental state.
Yeah, because they don't come and say, it sounds like you've been working a lot and let's analyze. They just do their dance. Absolutely. How do you, and this actually might be good for both of you, how do you make sure you make time for your most important relationships? And with that, how do you guard and protect your time so that happens?
We live and die by the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
We have shared calendars. We are crazy people and have color coding, and everybody in the family has a different calendar. We also have different calendars for our businesses. And so for us, the biggest thing that we have done this past year, 2 years, 3 years, is putting the most important things on the calendar first. And those are non-negotiable. So if the kids have an activity at school, or, they're playing a sport, or if we want to put our date night on the calendar, or family dinners, that's on there and it's an automatically recurring event. Those are the things that go first. And they are, for the most part, I would say 99% of the time, they do not get moved or deleted from the calendar. Obviously, we have freedom, so we can shift things sometimes if needed, but we try to keep that kind of sacred so that we're not letting those priorities fall off. I also typically have a lot of girls' nights and things put on the calendar because I very much so need time with people and time out of the house.
Yeah, well, there's a quote out there just to add on to that, and I'm totally going to butcher it, but it basically says, prioritize or schedule your priorities. Don't prioritize your schedule, and that's the biggest thing. Whatever is the most important, Like schedule that first and then have everything else fit around it. Because what happens far too often is that people aren't intentional. And when you're not intentional about those things, it's very easy to have like a date night fall off. But if we're intentional saying, hey, we want to have at least 2 date nights a month, when we sit down and plan the month, guess what the first thing we talk about is, all right, when are we having our 2 date nights? Let's mark that out, because usually once it goes on the calendar, there's a lot higher chance that we're actually going to have it happen than if we like try to get our giant to-do list and try to do everything and then figure out where we fit it in.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. There's this belief that entrepreneurs have it's freedom and anything you want to do anytime you want. And it's funny, we won't even obey our own calendars. Like, no, damn it. I'm a rebel. If you go it, that's awesome. What's the best habit you all have around managing your money and, or about having possessions without having them owning you?
That's a good question.
I think for me, the biggest thing, so I went from, working in a corporate environment and then doing like consulting with a lot of these, business executives. And so for a while I had to look a certain way with how I dressed and what I drove. And the biggest thing that I've found over time was really figuring out what makes me happy and cutting out the stuff that doesn't. And so like when I left my 6-figure consulting job, I had everyone around me like giving me so much crap about like, oh, you're so stupid. What are you doing? You're irresponsible. Like, why would you do that? And for me, what was more important to me was every morning now I get to wake up and see my kids. When I was consulting at all these companies, I was leaving at 4 a.m. on a Monday morning and I was getting back Thursday night, Friday. I was literally in another city more than I was at my home. And so a lot of people just look at the money and they're like, oh, you make all this money. That's great. When you truly understand what's important to you, suddenly everything else fades away. Like I wear a black t-shirt every day. Like that is my wardrobe now.
He really does.
And like we've really, at least for me, I've started to cut away anything that doesn't make me happy, that doesn't serve that purpose. And I found that with a much simpler life, I can truly spend more time focusing on the stuff that I truly care about and makes me happy.
Yeah. And I think for me, a lot of it was about changing perspectives. We grow up in this culture of having to have the nicest things and showing off, and everyone wants to post pictures of their awesome cars and houses and everything's so great. There's this image that you have to portray, and it's very easy to fall into that trap of always having to one up or catch up to all the people that are around you in your circle. And for me, I think it was changing that perspective and reframing that in my head to care less about what other people thought about what we have, and really just being grateful and double checking when I wanted to buy something new. Like, is it really for me that I'm buying that thing, or is it because someone else thinks that I should have that thing that I'm going to buy? And in that, we downgraded our car. And again, we got the same, why are you downgrading your car? You had an Explorer, you live in upstate New York. Like, don't you want 4-wheel drive?
Shouldn't you be upgrading your car?
Shouldn't be upgrading your car. And it was like, well, yeah, someday we plan on upgrading back. But right now, the smartest thing and the thing that made the most sense for our family was to downgrade to what's still an awesome car. Hey, Toyota Camrys. And it works for our family. But what it also worked for was the fact that we decided for Tom was going to leave his 6-figure job, and we cut back on some things. We did some downgrading in our life so that we could make that dream a reality and start moving towards this goal and this vision that we had for our life. So, I think it's reframing. It's thinking outside the box and looking at it from a different perspective a lot of times.
Well, I was gonna say, and I just want to tell this quick story that I think really drives this point home. So there's a book a lot of people have read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And there's a game called Cash Flow 101. And so this game basically teaches you how to like get out of the rat race. And so the first time I played it, it's kind of like Monopoly and life combined. And so the first time I played it, I got like the doctor card. So I was making the income of a doctor, and everyone else at the table had their card. And the goal of the game was to be able to build your quote unquote passive income to exceed your expenses. And so we're playing, and we're like 15 minutes in, and this guy's like, oh, I'm out of the rat race. My passive income exceeded my expenses. And I'm looking down, I'm like, I got to make like another $8,000. How did this guy win? And I couldn't fathom it. I'm like, what job do you have? And the guy's like, oh, I'm a janitor. And I'm like, well, how the heck did you get out of the rat race before me? I'm a doctor. And he's like, I'm like, what, how much money do you have to make? He's like, oh, $1,000. I'm like, what? I got to make like 10 grand. And it took me some time to figure it out, but basically there's this concept out there of these golden handcuffs. And what we all do is we raise our living status to our income level. And what happens is we actually, in our book, we call it the false golden handcuffs, because with a couple changes to your lifestyle, you could probably have more of the freedom you want now. But what most of us do is we fall into this traditional trap of every time we make more money, we spend more money, and then we never feel like we can make a change or do anything because we're always right at the limit.
That's awesome. And it's funny that I'm definitely going to have you guys back another time, because I have some other questions that I want to get into you with that I know will take longer. So I'm going to go in a slightly different direction, because I said I would have those of y'all who are at the freelance stage and entrepreneur stage. I hope to at some point have you all back at another time to go deeper in that, because there's so much to what you all have said and so much what I found. It's the unsexy things that people need to be hearing. I went 2 years where well, first of all, we keep our cars for 10 years at least usually. And one of my cars finally broke down, and it was my Beachmobile. It was convertible. And I work from home. We didn't need to drive around much. It went 2 years where we just didn't have a second car.
Mm-hmm.
And I even took it as a challenge. I thought, okay, I'm going to buy a bike so I can ride to the beach when I go play my volleyball on Fridays. That's about an 8-9 mile bike ride. And in 90-degree weather, that's not a very comfortable bike ride. But I took it on as a challenge, and I lost a bunch of weight. And it was just one of those things to say, okay, every month, that was $500 I didn't have to make. Mm-hmm. And so many people, well, you don't this, you don't that. Like, look, you know nothing about my life. And certainly the people that are happiest, say the least, because they're happy doing their own thing. It's the people who aren't certain about what they're doing that are questioning, why don't you do this? It's, whether it's, I found this at times, the people, I happen to eat vegetarian, and that just annoys some people that are meat eaters. It throws them off. I'm like, look, I have no judgment about what you're doing. I've chosen this, and it's okay. And I don't drink as much as I did when I was college. Great, but I'll still have a drink, which then throws them even more because, I'm happy. Is that okay? And for the most part, I just love what one of the later Range Rovers looks like a Toyota. A Ford Explorer. They almost look the same. And here's this extra amount. And we have a Honda CR-V, and it looks almost exactly the same as the BMW that costs 3 times the price. I'm like, really? What more are you getting for that? But in my case, I'm able to, like you said, those false golden handcuffs. I don't have those handcuffs as much. And so I'm able to work less. And it's really that simple. And especially as you're an entrepreneur, you don't have to do that thing eventually where you say, well, my job is horrible. And since it's so bad, then I'm going to go out and spend a bunch of money because I deserve it, because I'm doing this work that's just horrible, which then, of course, just keeps the whole process going, because then you can never leave, instead of just doing basic stuff. Start cutting your expenses, start doing some basic things where you don't need them as much. So first of all, thank you for everything you all have shared so far. So much of it is on track with what I've seen, but you all have told so many in a way that's so much better than I've been able to. And that's not in a self-deprecating way. That's what I really love what you all are up to. So thank you for that. So share a little bit with our audience, if you don't mind, Lifestyle Builders. How can they find out about that? And tell maybe a little bit about that, because that's something you all are doing. It's the book and even the program that I think really could help a lot of the people that are in this audience.
Yeah, so essentially our goal, or my goal originally, was to leave my job and retire by 35. And as we made that happen, basically other people started asking us, like, hey, how can we do what you guys have done? And so we ended up, after a couple pivots and testing things out, creating Lifestyle Builders, which is really our coaching program and our whole philosophy for how to build a business to help you create that life that you're looking for. So we have a podcast that Ariana and I host where we talk about different topics related to life and business and how to make it all work. As you mentioned, we have our first book coming out this year called Lifestyle Builders, Build Your Business, Quit Your Job, and Live Your Ideal Life, where we walk through our entire framework. And then we have coaching and training programs where we actually take people through, just like you said, the different stages of growing a business. So what you do when you're just getting started, what you do once you start making some money and you want to scale it up, and then how to even build a team, put systems in place so that as you build that business, you can actually step away from it and get the freedom and not have it so that the more time you spend, or the bigger your business gets, the more time you have to spend in it. So people can find everything that we have going on at tomandariana.com. And if they want to learn more about some of our coaching programs, they can go to joinlifestylebuilders.com.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Something to point out to people, and this is something we all know this from the coaching world, and it's something very different that I've experienced over the years. I've spent 20 plus years in a consulting industry where people kind of fear having what is perceived competition, where they help them get a message out. And a lot of the thought is this scarcity vision that there's not enough to go around, B, they're my competition, as opposed to a different vision, which we've seen, and we're certainly not the only people to do this, but this idea of, well, hey, here's a shocker. If somebody buys, I don't know, a Deepak Chopra book, maybe they'll buy a Wayne Dyer book. Maybe they actually just want to grow, and there's enough. And so some people might say, well, wait, are you saying that your stuff's not good? No, this is about understanding people are at different spots, but also there's different niches. There really are very specific things, as we've talked about. For you all, there's stuff you all can do and help people with couples that maybe other people can't do as well. And I think there's so much to be said for, if you're listening, if you're in the audience, you might find 5 to 10 people that speak on your topic, but there's going to be 1 or 2 maybe that really resonate with you. Mm-hmm. And to where you hear their style, you hear where they're coming from. And I encourage you to do that. And definitely don't buy 10 programs. Buy 1, at most 2. And read the book. And if you read the book and you read the book all the way through, that means all the pages, maybe not the index, but all the pages, and you actually get through it, and you still think you'd like to do it, and you've even done the exercises they suggested. I mean, this is our model. And again, I know Tom and Ariana, you are familiar with this. That's how we want to meet people that say, look, I've read your book. Hey, if you all probably had this, I've had people said, wait, I didn't even read your book. I listened to one of your episodes and I'm working 4 days. Awesome, dude. That's that's in our model. That's not a problem. I just think that's something that people, when they question, oh, well, why are people always pitching each other? It's not even so much pitching. I know I have a desire to help at least 4 million people get to a 4-day work week lifestyle. And recently it dawned on me that at least, and this was so liberating, I could maybe get at least 3 million of those people to go to my friends and then help my friends help. I'm like, yes, I get credit for that. It's somewhat of a joke, but at the same time, it's that whole saying of, if you're really committed to getting a result, you're not concerned about who gets credit for it. There's so much you can get done. Yeah. So for those of y'all who are listening, I've not done a lot of interviews in the past because I wanted to first establish that, I knew the topic. You all definitely, from what I've seen and interacting with you, Tom, and especially now interacting with both of y'all, have a lot to offer. And I just encourage people in general, look for those people that are telling you it's work. It's going to take some time. It doesn't take that long. But on the flip side, the good part is it's almost inevitable. And if you're willing to put in the time, especially how much easier it is than like 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it's almost inevitable to be able to do it. So thank you all so much for joining me. I'm so glad to have you on here. And I'm looking forward to listening to more of your episodes. And any last thoughts you have for everybody before we end this interview?
I'm just going to go with our tagline. It's your life, your business, your way. If you remember that, you're on the right path.
Amen. Thank you so much for coming out. And if you all have any questions on this, as always, you can let me know, connect with me by email or on the site. And as always, I look forward to helping you make more money in less time doing what you do best.